Okay, so this is my third video on the Chrysler NewYorker, and what we're going to look at today is the rear end. The rear end, or what people call the rear axle beam, tends to rust out, and when they rust out, the springs will poke through their perches. When that happens, it's a little dangerous. I heard of a story on the NewYorker forum where it happened to somebody in the driveway, and bad things happened. So mine were bending down, as you can see by this picture, too far, and it was becoming quite dangerous. So I decided that I needed to reinforce it to fix the problem. Well, I decided I would go buy some steel. Here's the steel angle I bought, and I thought I would have that welded in. Of course, that was only after doing an internet search for the rear ends that are compatible with the Chrysler NewYorker, which turns out it's the Imperial. This is a 92 Chrysler NewYorker. The ones that are compatible are the Imperial and the Dodge Dynasty. I went to the local pick-apart because I saw by their car listing that they had a couple Chrysler NewYorkers and a Dodge Dynasty in stock, although they didn't list this rear axle beam on the car-part.com. So what I did is I went there and ripped one off. Pick apart. I've never really been to one. It was a good adventure. So I went and I got this, and of course it was, rusty, but not nearly as bad as mine. So I'm going to try to show you a picture of this. There's a couple names for it. The only one that comes to mind right now is the Coil Perch. So if I zoom out, you can see the entire coil there. What I did to clean this up, because it was nasty, and you can see by some of the the uneven surfaces that rust has started to take its toll, although it's in much better shape than mine. Mine, I don't know if you can see the center piece of metal in here was completely rusted through to where there was only a slight ring of metal around the outside. So these are much better, and the fact that I spent a lot of hours cleaning them with a grinder set up with a wire brush. Also, I use a combination of vinegar and detergent and scrub that in. I'll use some more. I'll let that sit for a little bit, and then I rub in, and then I'll hit it with the wire brush again, and I'll go through that cycle. You can see there's still little spots that probably could be touched up. I'm going to go, so after I did that, I put on some Rust-Oleum rust converter. After I put on the rust converter and let it sit for a while, I put on a layer of clear. So this is just a clear coat of typical Rust-Oleum paint over top of this. Eventually I'm going to go back and I'm going to put underbody on here. So when you're taking off this rear axle beam assembly, you might want to, or you might think that you want to take out the bolt. There's a bolt, yeah, there it is. This bolt here that runs through this assembly here, where there's a rubber bushing in there. Well, that would be a bad choice. Instead, you want to take out these two bolts here. So you want to take out the additional bolt, which is right here. So basically, I'm looking up from the bottom of the car into this piece here, and then right under that. So you take out those 3 bolts. But before you do that, you should take out your shock mount bolt. Beauty of all this, as far as the rear axle beam compatibility with the different air shocks and disc brakes, drum brakes, is you don't have to worry about it, because once you take off this assembly, the whole hub assembly in here will unbolt. You can see this bolt here is one of the 4 bolts that holds this wheel on. And it can all be taken off, and you can just go ahead and use your old ones. You don't have to replace all of that because of you're replacing this axle beam. Take off the 2 shock mount bolts, and then you take out these bolts here. And as you do that, of course, when you take out your shock bolts, the coils will push down, and then as you take these out, it'll free up the rear axle beam to push down even farther until the coil basically drops out. And then when the coil drops out, you can go ahead and disconnect. In my case, since I've eliminated the ABS wire, I didn't have to worry about that. But if you don't want to eliminate it, actually remnants of mine still here, you need to take that bolt out, and then you wedge something underneath it and pry up under it and take that out so you can disconnect that. The other thing that you need to disconnect is your parking brake. So this is the parking brake that runs in through here, and you can disconnect that by loosening. There's an adjustment bracket on your parking brake, which is right there. You want to take that out, loosen that nut right there, and then this just pops out because it's just sticking into your frame. So if you pull that out, it'll loosen everything up for you. And then there's another disconnect right here, which you just slide this cable in, and then this little stopper pops on out, and that'll disconnect your emergency brake cable from the rear axle beam. The other thing to take apart, and what I did is I left my hydraulic lines connected to the brakes. So my brake lines were connected, and what I did is I just unbolted it down here where this little gold bolt is, unbolted that, then I unbolted it here, and then I unbolted it here, which you can't see that when it's behind here. So basically I disconnected this so that I'm able to move this up and just hang it off whatever you can find up here. You take your caliper off here and then hang it up there, and that'll disconnect that assembly from there. Thing that I didn't realize is you don't have to take out the emergency brake. On any disc brake car, the emergency brake is actually a small little setup of brake shoes. So instead of the caliper design here, it's made of brake shoes. And then the brake shoes, you could leave that whole assembly all together. What I did is, since I disconnected this line, I just pulled it back through. So I ended up, so I could disconnect all of this. And so once you do all that, take this off. Now if you're not swapping out your wheel assembly, then you need to take off your wheel, and then you need to take off your hub in here by taking out this and then the nut that holds that on. If you get that out, then all this will pop out. Then you can loosen the 4 bolts that hold the wheel assembly on in here. And I noticed at the junkyard people like to take those, because if you can replace just this outer piece, you don't have to replace your wheel bearings. So I did have to replace my wheel bearings on this one because they were messed up. Basically the outer bearing had some play in it. I'm going to get to bleeding my brakes because I didn't, on one side I actually ended up breaking the hard line, and I ended up replacing it. I'll show that to you. So over here you can see where I broke my hard line, and then I replaced it with, I think this is kind of like, I don't know if it's, seems to have more copper in it than other brake lines, and it's actually a better product in my opinion. They say it rusts out less than your typical steel lines. It's easier to form. Also, if you need to flare the ends, it's a better product for that. So I would definitely recommend that. Looks like that might need tightened up a little bit. I'm going to check those. Feel free to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll give you some more updates on this old Chrysler NewYorker 5th Avenue. Thanks for watching.